Hi everyone, I'm Cindy from Stamp the Night Away, and today we are going to be making this shadow box card. It's going to be a little bit different today because my audio wasn't working when I recorded the video, so I am doing a voice overlay. I apologize if the narration is a little bit off from the actual video. I love this card and the shadow box effect it gives. We're going to be using the colors Blackberry Bliss and Highland Heather. I'm actually out of Highland Heather cardstock after making this series of cards. I just love it so much. It's such a wonderful color with Stampin' Up. We're going to be using the Free as a Bird stamp set. We're going to be using the bird image and one of the greetings. The world needs more of you. It's such a versatile set. I love the greetings and the images that this has in it and everything all around. So in the description bar below, you will see a link to my blog, and that will give you this video tutorial, a picture tutorial with step-by-step instructions, and also a list of all the supplies that you need to make this card. And you just have to click on the item and it will take you straight to that item in my online store. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe below to see more videos. So we're going to go ahead and get started with a piece of 4.5 by 4.5 cardstock. And we're going to be making our own DSP, Designer Series paper. We're using the Highland Heather ink. We're also going to be using Blackberry Bliss. And we're going to be doing this with the two flowers that are in the stamp set. I'm going to start with the larger flower, and we are going to randomly stamp that along the page. I'm going to grab some scrap paper to put under it because I like stamping off the page a little bit. It just makes it look more natural. So I'm going to put that underneath, and I'm just using our grid paper. So I am going to randomly stamp the large flower all over the page. You usually start when you're making your own DSP with the larger image. It lets you fill in then the spaces with the smaller image. And you can make your own DSP pretty much out of any stamp set that has image stamps. Alright, so I am going to then clean off my stamp on my Stampin' Scrub, which is off to one side, and put my ink pad away so I don't stick my hand in it later. I always end up covered in ink. So now I'm going to come in with the smaller flower and Highland Heather and fill in the white spots on the card. Just anywhere I think is a larger gap that could use some filling in. I'm going to stamp with the small flower. I love making my own DSP. It's so much fun. And you could do this on any color cardstock. I just happen to be using the Whisper White today. But you could do tone on tone, or you could stamp on lighter cardstock with a darker color. You can pretty much design any kind of paper you would like. So we're going to set that aside and bring in our piece of Whisper White that we're going to be stamping our bird on. And I'm going to grab my Memento ink, and that's what we're going to be using to stamp the bird with. Now I did try doing this at a diagonal, and there just isn't quite enough room on a standard card base to do that. You would need a much smaller image and then a smaller shadow box. Using a piece of 4.5 by 4.5 cardstock for the shadow box, it just doesn't fit diagonally on a standard card base. So we're going to stamp the bird in Memento and usually tap, 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 and then twist, and then tap, tap, tap to get really good coverage with the Memento ink. I'm going to go ahead and stamp my bird and then clean that stamp off to the side with my Stampin' Scrub. Now the Memento ink works really good with the blends markers, which is what I'm going to use to color this bird in a moment. But first we're going to stamp our greeting. And again, the greeting is the world needs more of you. Now we'll be stamping that in Blackberry Bliss onto the Highland Heather cardstock. And this is going to be stamped in the bottom quarter of the Highland Heather piece. And the Highland Heather measures 5 inches by, 5 1/4 by 4 inches. And this is going to be our layer on our card base. So I'm going to go ahead and clean that stamp off. And then we'll bring the bird back in and do some coloring. I stuck my nails in the ink pad. Of course, I always have to get ink all over the place. I'm just going to rub those through the Stampin' Scrub and clean them off. There we go. Alright, so let's get started with our coloring. And again, we're going to be using the blends markers. And I'm going to be using light and dark of the Highland Heather. And then I'm going to be using the Mango Melody Light to do the beak. When I start with blends, I always like to start with the light and to color the entire image in, or at least the part of it that I'm going to be doing that color. It just gives you a good base to start with the blends markers. And then you can always come in with the dark or even with the light again and do some shading. So I'm going to do the entire image in the Highland Heather light. And then I'm going to come back in with the dark, and I'm just going to shade the natural spots that the stamp already shaded for us with black lines. I'm going to come in with the Highland Heather dark blends and then reshade those. When working with the blends, it's best to do little areas at a time because they dry so fast, they blend better if you can do little areas. So I just started with the belly of the bird, and then I'm going to come in and do the wing, tail, and the back of the head. And again, I'm just shading the areas that the stamp is already shown shaded. Come back in with the light again and blend that all in. Blends make me look like an artist. I love it. I'm really not that great at coloring, but the blends make it so easy. Then I'm going to use the Mango Melody, and I'm just going to color in the beak. I'm going to be using the thin tip on that one. So the blends markers have a thin and a thick tip. Alright, we're going to set those aside. Our bird is finished. And I'm going to bring in our piece of DSP that we made and my cutting board. And I'm just going to flip this up, and I'm going to use the bone trimmer. And we're going to make a little dash mark. We're not going to score all the way across at 2 1/4 on each side. Excuse me. And that 2 1/4 mark is halfway on the page on each side. So I am going to line that up on my cutting board. And I tried doing this with the scoring tool on the cutting board, but it was just easier for me to see using our bone folder. So I'm going to line it up at 2 1/4. And on each end, I'm just going to make a little dash mark using the line that is already on the board. The cutting track. That's what I was thinking of. And I'm going to flip it around, and I'm going to do the same thing on the other 2 sides. And just making a little dash mark that I can come back and see later. I'm going to set the board aside. And then, oh, I forgot to stamp the other side of our DSP. Because the way of the shadow box is designed, you need both sides of your piece of paper stamped. So if you are using our designer series paper out of the catalog, you need to make sure that you like both sides of the piece of paper for your card, because both sides will be showing. In this case, I'm just doing both sides the same. So again, the big flower in the Blackberry Bliss. And then I'm going to clean that stamp off and come in with the little flower and the Highland Heather. And there's no pattern to this, it's just randomly stamping around. Makes it that much more fun. Alright, almost done. Couple more flowers. There we go. Alright, clean that stamp off. put my ink pads away so I don't stick my hand in them. It's the worst when you go to touch something and your sleeve scrapes across an ink pad, or your hand does, and then you get ink everywhere. So if you look, let's see if we can get it to show in the camera. There. You can see a little tag or hash mark that we made on the scoreboard. I'm going to take a ruler and we're going to line up the hash marks on two of the edges across the corner, like so. And then we are going to make a score line with our bone folder. Now our pad of grid paper is pretty thick, so it's got just enough cushion for me to be able to score on it and get a really good line. And we're going to do that across all four corners, just rotating it around, lining the ruler up with the hash marks, and scoring diagonally. And one more. And that gives us an interior square that we're going to put our image on eventually. So now that we have that down, we're going to come in and we're going to fold those corners inward. And it doesn't matter right now what direction you're doing it. If you have a preference and you're using our designer series paper out of the catalog, you can pick which side you want to show in which direction. So I'm just going to burnish those down, make sure they're folded really well. They do overlap a little bit, so I just want to make sure they're pressed down good. And then we're going to come back in and we're going to fold the top corners backwards. Now I'm folding them over the edge a little bit. The farther you fold them back, the larger your interior of your shadow box will be. The less you fold them back, the smaller it will be. So I'm folding them so they're probably about 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit less, sticking past the edge of the shadow box. Alright, folding back the last corner. And again, I'm just going to burnish those down. It helps the adhesive stick later on too. Alright, we're going to open those up and set that aside. And we are going to start putting our pieces together. So I'm going to take our bird and our Stampin' seal, and I'm going to adhere that to a piece of Blackberry Bliss. Now you won't really see this in my shadow box, but if you use a smaller image, you will be able to see the layers that you put it on. Or if you fold the top corners back farther. So again, I use Stampin' seal, and I'm putting that Whisper White with the bird onto a layer of Blackberry Bliss. And again, if you click the link to my blog, all of the measurements and supplies are listed there, along with a step-by-step tutorial and this video. So then I'm putting Stampin' seal on the back of the Blackberry Bliss and sticking it into the center of our shadow box, like so. Stick that down, and then our shadow box corners will come in. Alright, so now I'm going to use Stampin' seal on the back, and I'm making sure that I just put it in that square, not on the pieces that we folded inward. And I want to make sure this really sticks down, so I'm going to do all four sides. You can also use the Stampin' seal Plus, which is a stronger adhesive. Alright, so we are going to put that on another piece of Blackberry Bliss, and this is just going to give it a nice border that really makes our shadow box pop off the card. And again, all the measurements are listed on my blog. Alright, so I'm going to center that on the Blackberry Bliss. And I'm not adhering the corners down because it's just easier right now to keep them flat while I'm attaching all the pieces of the card. So now we need more Stampin' seal on the back of the Blackberry Bliss. Actually, I'm going to start with the Highland Heather, and we're going to put that on our card base of Whisper White. My Stampin' seal is running out, so it's being a little testy with me. And you want to make sure you definitely tip it up and get that good flick on it. It just makes it run that much smoother. Again, it's running out and I'm not too great at the flick yet. So you tip it up and flick backwards. And it snaps the adhesive off really nice. Alright, so we're going to put that on our card base of Whisper White, which is a piece of 8.5 by 11, cut in half and scored in half. So this is cut at 4 1/4 and scored at 5 1/2. So we're going to put our Highland Heather layer on, and then we are going to put our shadow box on. And again, I am using Stampin' Seal adhesive. And I probably use too much adhesive, but I want to make sure my cards really stick together. Alright, so I'm going to center that in the top 3/4 of the page. If you remember right, we stamped our image in the bottom part so that it would fit nicely. Now I'm going to use Stampin' Dimensionals, and we're going to put our corners down. Now I use the edging of my Stampin' Dimensionals. You can see these pages are kind of running out, but if you just make little slits along the edge, you can use the edging pieces and it works just as well. I really like that you can use the entire sheet of dimensionals, not just the ones that are pre-cut. So I'm going to put those right along the edge of my layers. They'll probably overlap a little bit on the Blackberry Bliss, but like I said, my image is pretty large for this style of card. So a lot of that's going to be covered up. The smaller your image and the smaller you do that inside square, the more you'll see of it. So I'm going to take my backings off. I just have a little trash can off to the side. And we're going to push our corners in. And we're only adhering that inside layer. We're not adhering the outside corners. I just want those to pop up. And that is our card done. Now, there was a little bit of problem. The dimensionals don't always stick. So you always can come in with some liquid glue or some Stampin' Seal and adhere them all the way down. Don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more videos. And please share this with all your friends so they can enjoy this video as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you again next time.